Well, this is a tremendous victory for the Ukrainians, and it's a victory that I think that they could turn into a cascading series of defeats of Russian forces. This is the encirclement of Lyman and the Russian forces pulling back. And I think, Margaret, what we might be here is really at the precipice of really the collapse of the Russian army in Ukraine, a moral collapse. And I think they must really be at a breaking point if you look at just the numbers of casualties, the vast area that they're trying to defend. And now, of course, Russia is trying to mobilize conscripts and send them to the front untrained. And I think it's very important to also understand that these forces that are in full retreat now out of Lyman were really the first round of mobilization. Remember when Putin was trying to recruit more and more people with paying about 3 times the average wages to get so-called volunteers to go forward? Those forces were hastily trained, thrown into that front, and these are the forces that are collapsing just right now. Well, I think the message to him is if you use a nuclear weapon, it's a suicide weapon. And the response from NATO and the United States doesn't have to be nuclear. First of all, I would say he's under extreme pressure. I mean, you have the failures on the battlefield, which we talked about, but also the mobilization's failing. I mean, what he's done is he's mobilized almost 300,000 people to leave the country. These are men who are fleeing to neighboring countries to escape this conscription. And you have the Russian people now saying, okay, I thought this was a special military operation that Putin said, hey, just leave this to me. Don't worry about it. Now he's going to them to bail him out. With this mobilization, and what you're seeing, among the hyper-nationalist group of bloggers and even on state media is a blaming of the military. And what the military is going back to Putin and saying, hey, it's not our fault, we just need more troops. So it's this cycle that he's responding to with the only quiver he has left, which is to threaten the use of a nuclear weapon. I don't think a nuclear weapon is usable there. So I think that we ought to take it seriously. We have to. But we ought to not allow this to cow us in terms of the support for the Ukrainians. I left in February, March of 2018, but while I was there, I did not see any problems in handling of classified information. And the president did not disclose classified information, but somebody leaked it, and then it was published in a newspaper. So the classified information. I think what is important is to go back to that period and that provision of javelins, of the defensive capabilities to the Ukrainians was really important. And the argument I made to President Trump at the time was, hey, these people who are telling you that it's provocative to provide Ukraine with defensive capabilities, actually what provokes Putin is weakness. And he was persuaded by that argument. And I think that argument is still relevant today. I mean, as Putin is encountering these difficulties, I think it's now time to remove some of the restrictions that we've put on ourselves in terms of the support to give the Ukrainians. And I'm talking about really long-range surveillance capabilities tied to long-range precision strike. And that's really what they need, I think, to maintain the momentum militarily at this stage. Think about all the support that we've given now to the Ukrainians. What if we had done that a few years ago? I think Putin may have come to the conclusion, well, Ukraine cannot be subsumed at an acceptable cost. And of course, he was wrong in all the assumptions that led to the invasion, and he's been proven wrong by courageous Ukrainians who are defending their sovereignty. But I think deterrence by denial for us was a failure. I mean, in many of the actions that we took in the months before the invasion, almost, I think, inadvertently greenlighted it, pulling our forces out of the Black Sea, listing all the things we weren't going to do. And I think the Biden administration has recovered from that very well. But I think now's the time, Margaret, to lift restrictions on the support that we're giving Ukrainians so they can finish this fight on their terms.
I don't think the World War III rhetoric is super helpful, right? Because it kind of plays into Putin's hands. And what he's trying to do is to threaten an escalation of the war so that we will throttle back on our support for Ukraine. So I think it's important for us to recognize that Russia is going to do everything it can to try to interdict the resupply for the Ukrainians. And this is humanitarian assistance and also replenishing some of their military capabilities. It's going to be more and more contested, I think, in the far west by these kind of long-range capabilities. But I think what you're seeing is that Russia is really getting desperate, right, with not only this action to try to interdict the supply routes, but also, with this kind of, trying to lay the groundwork for maybe the use of chemical weapons, which is concerning. But then also, Putin rattling his nuclear saber. So this is, I think, a real sign of weakness. I mean, I think Russia And Putin in particular is in real trouble. Well, Gail, they already have tremendous support from China. Remember, right before the Olympics, they both called each other their BFFs. Really, that there are no limits to their partnership.
Yes.
Exactly. And what China's been doing is providing cover for Russia's mass murder of innocent civilians. Spouting the same narrative that this isn't really a war, calling it a special military operation. Also supporting these kind of false claims of military biolabs in Ukraine. So China, I think this ought to be hung around China's neck, this horrible assault on Ukraine. And I think it's a tremendous moment, Gail, for the free world, I think, to shift the balance back in favor of the free world and away from these two authoritarian dictatorships. I just don't think it's good practice to take things off the table. Why don't we just stop doing that, right? Stop talking about what we're not going to do. Create some dilemmas, for Putin. I think for too long, we made it too easy for him. We vacated the Black Sea. We withdrew everybody from Ukraine. We said all the things we're not going to do. And, in retrospect, it seems kind of almost that we, in some ways, green-lighted the invasion with some of these actions. Now, I think the administration has done a very good job in galvanizing, the free world against this Russian aggression. So now it's time to take advantage of it. And I think it's time just to stop talking about what we're not going to do. Well, we need to extend, I think, the economic sanctions to China, and we need to accelerate that anyway, right? Because this is a country that is committing slow genocide of the Uyghur population. This is a country where the Chinese companies, have to literally act as an arm of the Chinese party as it continues to extend and tighten its exclusive grip on power, to extinguish human freedom in China, and to continue to be aggressive in the South China Sea and against Taiwan and on the Himalayan frontier with India. So I think step A is, hey, why don't we just stop underwriting our own demise with China? Why don't we restrict, some of the financial flows that go into China that are the scaffolding that hold up their statist, mercantilist economic model, one that they weaponize against us? So I think there are a lot of things we can do to shore up supply chains. And, hey, how about it like a sensible energy policy as well that recognizes the tremendous potential that the United States has to not only satisfy our needs, but also to break some of the dependence that Russia has, and to demonstrate to China that, hey, China cannot pursue its interests in this partnership with Russia. But I'll tell you, there's a lot we can do in terms of sensible long-term policies. And I think this ought to be a wake-up call, right? It was Germany's and Europe's dependence on Russian oil and gas that at the beginning muted our response. Hey, let's start managing these economic dependencies on China. And hey, also recognize it's China that wants to decouple on its own terms. This is Xi Jinping's idea of this dual circulation economy.